Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu, and with me is Manoj Singh Rana, bringing glimpses of major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. As the number of COVID cases are on the rise again, we appeal to our listeners not to lower the guard, follow all the precautions and all those above 45 years to get vaccinated without any hesitation. Stay safe and protected by following these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki doori for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. The headlines. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian en route to New Delhi on a 5-day visit to India. Issues of defense cooperation, climate change and trade high on the agenda. Indian Information and Broadcasting Minister Prakash Javadekar says fresh project investments in India touched a whopping 10.72 lakh crore rupees amid COVID-19 pandemic. Bangladesh issues notification for week-long hard lockdown starting from Wednesday to contain spread of COVID-19 infection. United States expresses serious concerns over China's actions directed against Taiwan. Nomadland adjudged Best Picture at British Academy of Film and Television Awards BAFTA Awards. And in IPL Cricket, Punjab Kings set a target of 222 runs for Rajasthan Royals in Mumbai. French Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs Jean-Yves Le Drian will arrive in New Delhi on a 5-day visit to India in a short while from now. During his visit, Mr. Le Drian will hold talks with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar tomorrow on bilateral, regional and international issues of mutual interest. The visiting dignitary will call on Prime Minister Narendra Modi tomorrow evening. He will also meet Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change Prakash Javadekar at a panel discussion on climate change. Mr. Le Drian will also participate in the Raisina Dialogue. India and France enjoy a strategic partnership since 1998, which has been marked by regular high-level exchanges and growing cooperation in diverse areas. Mr. Le Drian's visit will pave the way for further strengthening of the partnership across trade, defense, climate, migration and mobility, education and health sectors in the post-COVID context. Indian Information and Broadcasting Minister Prakash Javadekar has said that amidst the pandemic, fresh project investments in India touched a whopping 10.72 lakh crore rupees. In a tweet, Mr. Javadekar said, in the last 3 months alone, about 4 lakh crore rupees were invested. He said, it is a reflection of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's proven and sustainable leadership.
The government of Bangladesh on Monday issued the official notification for the week-long hard lockdown starting from Wednesday, 14th of April, to control the spiraling COVID-19 pandemic in the country. According to the notification, public transport, including buses, railways, waterways and flights, will remain suspended, but freight transport services and vehicles needed for the essential services will be allowed to operate. All public offices, both in the government and non-government sector, will remain closed, except those involved in essential works like health services, COVID vaccination, media, power distribution, water and internet services. Financial services, including the banks, will remain closed during the period of the lockdown. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 deaths continued to surge in Bangladesh. On Monday, the country reported a record 83 deaths in a single day since March last year, when the first corona-positive case was recorded in the country. 7,201 new corona cases were also reported during the same period. With this, death toll due to COVID-19 in Bangladesh has gone up to 9,822. India has administered over 10 crore 45 lakh COVID-19 vaccine doses in the country so far. The Indian Health Ministry said that more than 29,33,000 beneficiaries have been inoculated with COVID-19 vaccine doses in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, a total number of 1,68,912 new cases have been reported in the country in the past 24 hours, taking the cumulative positive cases to over 1 crore 35 lakh. The country's COVID-19 recovery rate is at 89.86%.
The United States has expressed serious concerns over China's actions directed against Taiwan. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Sunday said that it would be a serious mistake for anyone to try to change the status quo in the Western Pacific by force. In a televised interview, Mr. Blinken added that the increasingly aggressive actions by China are a real concern to the U.S. and it has a commitment to Taiwan and towards ensuring sustained peace and security in the Western Pacific. The Taiwan Relations Act seeks to maintain peace, security and stability in the Western Pacific. It also seeks to further the continuation of commercial, cultural and other relations between the U.S. and Taiwan. Washington and Beijing have seen a spike in tensions over Taiwan recently. On Thursday, China blamed the U.S. for tensions after an American warship sailed close to Taiwan. The White House in turn said that it was keeping a close watch on increased Chinese military activities in the Taiwan Strait. Japan began COVID-19 vaccinations for its sizable elderly population today. Shots for people aged 65 and above began at 120 sites across the country. After visiting a vaccination center in Hachioji, west of Tokyo, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said he expected to secure 100 million vaccine doses by the end of June, more than enough to give 2 doses to the elderly population of 36 million.
China's Ant Group, a financial affiliate of e-commerce giant Alibaba Group Holding, has been ordered for a major overhaul by the Chinese market regulator to become a financial holding company. The new guidelines for Ant's overhaul come days after Alibaba was fined $2.8 billion following an antitrust probe into the company founded by billionaire Jack Ma after derailing its planned $34.5 billion initial public offering in November last year. This will up the financial oversight by the government amid stepped-up security of technology firms. The People's Bank of China and other financial regulators also ordered Ant to cease anti-competitive behavior in its payments business and improve its risk management and corporate governance. This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
3 steps to stay protected and stay safe from COVID-19. Wear face mask, 2 gaz ki duri to maintain social distancing, maintain hand and face hygiene.
In today's hotspot section, we are focusing on US-Iran nuclear standoff and its implications. Today, journalist Ms. Nilovar Roy Chaudhary is in conversation with former diplomat Mr. Anil Wadhwa.
Today we are talking about efforts between the United States and Iran to revive the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known as the Iran nuclear deal, negotiated and signed initially in 2015 between Iran and the 5 permanent members of the United Nations and Germany. To throw light on the implications of these renewed discussions, Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, on April the 6th, the United States joined talks in Vienna which were aimed at reviving the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which President Trump had withdrawn from in 2018. Now, since President Joe Biden has said he wants to return to this landmark accord, both Iran and the United States are trying to find their way to return to the agreed limits. Iran has said it will not meet the United States face-to-face till that happens. So now officials from the United Kingdom, France and Germany have been acting as intermediaries. Diplomats from Russia and China also attended discussions, and on 9th April, a joint commission meeting of the JCPOA members was held in Vienna, and the meeting followed a virtual and in-person meeting, and they have to look at the U.S. sanctions that were imposed on Iran, and another working group will develop conditions that Iran has to comply with to execute the JCPOA. So while it would appear that an important beginning has been made, it will take time and efforts for both countries to revive the trust factor lost by the Trump administration's actions. What do you think, sir, are the implications of these talks for the region?
Nilova, I think I'll begin by saying that, there is a desire on the part of Iran as well as the United States to make a breakthrough. But of course, they both want it on their terms. And in the case of Iran, it's particularly important for the current government and the president, which is Hassan Rouhani, not to be seen as weak because the elections are coming up in Iran in June. So obviously, they would like to at least show the people that they have stood up to the United States. And that's why the stance has so far been that the United States must lift its sanctions, which were imposed during the Trump administration, in fact, reinforced during the Trump administration in 2019. And now there are something like 1,600 of these sanctions which need to be considered. So that's the first issue. Second issue is that as far as the United States is concerned, Biden has clearly said that it would not be the United States which is linked first. It will be the Iranians who will need to comply and go back to the compliance mechanism which was set up in the JCPOA, which they have gone back on under circumstances which they said was actually not fair to them and that the others had not complied with the agreement. So both have a point there. And what will happen in these talks would be that there would be a role which will be played by the group which has been set up, which is obviously the group which also brought about the JCPOA, led by the European Union and plus the 5 other countries who would go back and forth. They would meet the Iranians in the room. Iranians would give their proposals. They would then talk to the United States in a separate room, or the United States delegation will come in when the Iranians leave. And thereafter, if there is an agreement which is reached in some form in which they can both accommodate each other, then there would be the setting of the working group. At that stage, everybody expects that the working group comprised of representatives at the official level of United States and Iran, who would then be talking to each other and hammering out the technical part of the agreement. But the U.S. Point of view seems to be, and I think they would strive for that, is to reach an agreement before June elections so as to bind down the new administration, the new dispensation in Iran to this particular agreement.
Anil, the Israel or somebody seems to have complicated matters even further in all of this, because somebody has targeted the nuclear facility at Natanz in Iran last week. The Iranians are accusing Israel, and the U.S. Secretary of Defense, in fact, Lloyd Austin, visited Israel last week. So Iran is even suggesting that perhaps the United States had something to do with this. So is this kind of atmosphere of complete lack of trust, for want of a better word, is this going to really hamper things, do you think? I mean, how can these kinds of issues be resolved?
So I think as far as Israel is concerned, it's been a one-point agenda to try and sabotage these talks, because the Israelis are very clear that if there is any sort of agreement which is reached in Iran, even if it is limiting the kind of actions that they can take for enrichment, the eventual aim of Iran, according to them, is to go nuclear. And they have impressed upon the previous administration of the United States, the Trump administration, that this was actually the aim of the Iranians and that they should not fall for it. And that's what actually led to President Trump pulling out of this agreement in 2018. The current administration of the United States is more flexible. It feels that, there could be improvements perhaps which could be brought about in the 2015 agreement. And Trump administration had actually tried to extend this also to the missile facilities and to missiles in the possession of Iran. It seems to be a non-starter, and this administration, of course, is not so far pronounced itself on that. So as long as the old JCPOA is stuck to, I believe that there is room for reaching an agreement.
In the meanwhile, you also have China having signed this fairly comprehensive economic and defense deal with Iran, whereby for the next 20 odd years, they're going to put in a great deal of money, about $400 billion, and revive the Iranian oil sector that requires funding desperately. So now, again, in that kind of a scenario, doesn't it become less important for a country like Iran to actually comply with a lot of the issues that the United States wants them to comply with?
Nilova, I would not pay too much of credence to that agreement because that's been talked about in the past. There is nothing definitive about the sum of $400 billion over 25 years. And it's not been spelled out in those terms in the agreement that has been signed. That is, now subsequently the writings that have come out have all stressed upon the fact that it remains a vague agreement. In fact, the Iranians would much rather prefer if they could deal with the Europeans and the Americans eventually directly rather than just relying on the Chinese, because the Chinese presence has grown in Iran and, obviously Iran would like to diversify. Their aim is actually to be able to talk directly eventually to the United States and also to be able to pursue what they call the peaceful nuclear program. So as long as this agreement is not revived, they will not be able to do that. So therefore, I think that's a factor, but a very small factor. And, obviously, the Iranians themselves feel that is not adequate.
And the fact that, oil prices the world over again are in a fair deal of turmoil, what with the pandemic and so on. How does an agreement say, if the JCPOA is revived, how will it affect India, for example? And I mean, the broader region, of course, but also India. India would have certain stakes as well, wouldn't it?
Definitely. I think India will be affected in many ways. Mostly, I would say that it will have a beneficial effect on India if the JCPOA is revised. Why? Because first of all, it will allow India to import more from Iran as far as its energy imports are concerned. So oil, imports from Iran would definitely go up because the kind of oil which Iranian oil fields have, the Indian refiners much rather prefer that. That's one. Secondly, in terms of security, don't forget that Iran was an important partner of Russia and India as far as the Taliban were concerned in Afghanistan. That issue is hotting up again. And if India is able to deal with Iran directly on that issue, it would be very pleased if that can happen. Thirdly, it's a question of the opportunities which will arise for India vis-a-vis China, because at the moment it's only the Chinese companies who are operating in Iran. India is not doing that because of the threat of sanctions, even though they're not recognized by the United Nations. But then you have companies like Sinopec and China National Petroleum Corporation. Fourthly is the question of Pakistan, where Pakistan would gain from the Chinese push into Iran. That has implications for India as well. And the extension of OBOR into Iran would not be a good development for India. Fifthly is the question of the energy security and also connectivity plans that India has for Central Asia via Chabahar, for the North-South Transport Corridor, etc., and connectivity into Afghanistan through Chabahar again. So Indian investments into Chabahar cannot proceed unhindered as long as the JCPOA sanctions are not lifted. Right. And finally, I would also talk a little bit about, conversely, the non-beneficial effect, which would be that Iran would drive a hard bargain in future with India. It has other countries which will, suddenly pay their attention into Iran, especially the Europeans, as far as investments into gas fields, oil fields are concerned. Secondly, the question of Indian companies. How many of the Indian companies will be able to trade and invest in Iran in food, pharmaceuticals, transportation services, banking, information technology, and construction? So Iran is a big market, and all these countries would look for the same piece of the cake, and that would make competition that much difficult.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador Anil Vaswani.
Norway on Monday raised alarm over unhindered exploitation of dual-use technology by Pakistan to aid its nuclear program. According to a threat assessment report by the Norwegian security agencies, Pakistan's practice of bypassing all international safeguards in gaining latest nuclear technology on the pretext of using it for education and health is posing greatest threat to them. Norway is not the only country to realize the immense risk stemming from transferring critical technologies to Pakistan. Its assessment follows several other countries' public acknowledgement of the nuclear threat posed by Pakistan. German authorities disclosed in 2020 that Pakistan had sought technology for weapons of mass destruction (WMD) in order to retain a serious deterrent potential against India. The agency provided a detailed account of Pakistan's efforts to steal information and material about nuclear weapons. Czech Republic, in its report titled Annual Report of the Security Information Service for 2019, also drew global attention towards Pakistan misleading the world in procuring internationally controlled items and technologies to aid its nuclear program. In 2019, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted 5 persons associated with Pakistan-based Front Company for operating a network that exported U.S. origin goods to Pakistan.
Myanmar's detained government leader Aung San Suu Kyi asked a court on Monday to be allowed to meet her lawyers in person as she appeared at a hearing via video link to face charges brought by the military junta that could see her jailed for years. As a champion of decades of struggle against military rule appeared for the hearing, her supporters called for people to show their opposition to a February 1st coup during this week's traditional New Year holiday in the largest Buddhist country. Suu Kyi has been detained since the coup and charges with various offences, including violating a colonial-era Official Secrets Act that could see her jailed for 14 years. She has only been allowed to talk with her lawyers via video link in the presence of security officials, and it is not known if she is even aware of the bloody turmoil that has engulfed the country since the military seized power. The coup has plunged Myanmar into crisis after 10 years of tentative step towards democracy as the military stepped back from politics and allowed Suu Kyi to form a government after her party swept the 2015 election. The military says it had to overthrow her government because the November election, again won by her party, was rigged. The Election Commission dismissed the accusation. The coup has triggered relentless protest by those who cannot abide military rule and unyielding suppression by the generals who think only they can serve the country from disintegration.
Gig economy Western Nomadland won 4 prizes including Best Picture at the British Academy of Film and Television Arts BAFTA last night. The awards were given during a pandemic-curbed ceremony that recognized a diverse array of screen talent. Nomadland filmmaker Chloe Zhao became only the second woman and the first woman of color to win the BAFTA for Best Director, and star Frances McDormand was named Best Actress. Nomadland also took the Cinematography Prize. Emerald Fennell's revenge comedy Promising Young Woman was named Best British Film, while the Best Actor trophy went to 83-year-old Anthony Hopkins for playing a man grappling with dementia in The Father. The event rewarded a diverse group of talents, including Black British star Daniel Kaluuya, newcomer Bookie Buck-Ray, who's shown as a London teenager in Rocks, and a veteran Korean actress Yoo Young-yoon. The fact that Britain remains under coronavirus lockdown measures with its movie theatres still closed gave the evening a poignant tone, as did the death on Friday of Prince Philip, husband of Queen Elizabeth II, a long-time patron of the British Film Academy. The ceremony opened with a tribute to Philip, who was the Academy's first president in 1959. Presenters including Hugh Grant, Tom Hiddleston, Gugu Mandatha Rao and Priyanka Chopra Jonas announced the winners from the stage of London's Royal Albert Hall, but recipients accepted their honours remotely and there was no black-tie audience to cheer them on. India's Netflix film The White Tiger was nominated for 2 categories film awards, Best Actor and Best Adapted Screenplay. However, neither actor Adarsh Gaurav nor Ramin Bahrani won the awards. The Sensex and the Nifty today plunged around 3.5%. The domestic stocks tumbled in sync with losses in the global equity markets amid resurgence of COVID-19 infections. The Sensex at Bombay Stock Exchange closed below 48,000 mark, while the Nifty at National Stock Exchange slipped to trade near 14,300 level. The rupee also weakened 31 paise against the US dollar. A report from the Business World.
The Sensex plunged 1,708 points or 3.44% to trade at 47,883, and the Nifty declined 524 points or 3.53% to trade at 14,311. The broader market said the BSE fell more than the Sensex. The mid-cap index tumbled 5.32%, while the small-cap declined 4.81%. In the Sensex fact shares of 29 out of 30 companies plunged, while in sectoral indices all the 19 sectors tumbled. In the global equity market, Asian shares fell amid resurgence of coronavirus cases worldwide. Investors also booked profit at high valuations amid caution. China's Shanghai Composite Index declined 1.1% and Hong Kong's Hang Seng plunged 0.9%. Japan's Nikkei 225 declined 0.8% and Singapore's Straits Times fell 0.3%. South Korea's Kospi added marginally by 0.1%. European stocks were mixed in intraday trade. Back home, gold prices gained 130 rupees per 10 grams at multi-commodity exchange for April contracts. Gold futures were trading around 46,720 rupees per 10 grams. Silver futures also climbed 170 rupees to trade at around 67,150 rupees per kilogram for May contracts. Oil prices rose amid hopes that fuel demand is picking up in the United States. In intraday trade, the Brent was trading around $63.80 per barrel, and the rupee at the foreign exchange market weakened 31 paise to 75 rupees and 6 paise against the US dollar. Nishit Kumar for World News, All India Radio.
In the Ipl Cricket, Punjab Kings have set a target of 222 runs for Rajasthan Royals at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. In reply, Rajasthan Royals were 123 for 4 in 12.4 overs when reports last came in. Here is a report from Sports Desk.
In the game 4 tonight at Mumbai's Wankhede Stadium, new captain Sanju Samson proved lucky with the coin for Rajasthan Royals and opted to bowl first like the previous 3 encounters in the Indian Premier League. 4 new recruits, Mustafizur Rahman, Shivam Dubey, Chetan Sakaria and Manan Vohra have been given chance in the playing 11 by a team which can only improve upon from the last place finish in the previous season. And the man who has a lot of responsibility on his shoulders to lift the morale of Royals is IPL's most expensive player of all time, Chris Morris. With English paceman Jofra Archer missing from action at least for the first few games due to his shoulder injury, Morris understands his added responsibility as team's frontline bowler. Punjab Kings have 3 debutants with Shah Rukh Khan and Aussies Riley Meredith and Jay Richardson playing their first match for the franchise. Skipper KL Rahul, the Orange Cap winner last year, will have plenty to sort out inside the dressing room apart from his own indifferent form with the bat in recent times. On Sunday night, Kolkata Knight Riders began their campaign on an impressive note by defending their total of 187 successfully at the M.A. Chidambaram Stadium in Chennai. In fact, this was the first successful defence in the IPL 2021 after the first 2 games were won by chasing sides. In other sports news, Indian men's hockey team outclassed Argentina 3-0 to complete second win in as many days in Buenos Aires on Monday. Harmanpreet Singh in the 11th minute ended the deadlock, and later on Lalit Upadhyay in the 25th minute and Mandeep Singh in the 58th minute completed the whitewash for the visitors.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The New York Times reported on an incident caught on tape wherein a police officer in Virginia confronted a uniformed black army medic at gunpoint and pepper sprayed him during a traffic stop. Washington Post reports that 4 grey whales were found dead in 8 days in the San Francisco Bay Area. Reporting on Prince Philip's funeral, the Telegraph writes that it will be held next Saturday at 3 p.m. Following a short procession, senior members of the royal family will follow the coffin on foot as it is driven to St. George's Chapel. The Guardian writes that a fatal police shooting sparks protests in Minneapolis. The Globe and Mail reports that Canada will receive 1 million COVID-19 vaccine doses this week with only Pfizer delivery scheduled. South China Morning Post writes that China is exploring ways of increasing the efficacy of their COVID-19 vaccines by mixing different types of shots. And Gulf Time reports that Russians on Monday celebrate the 60th anniversary of the first manned flight to space carried out by cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin.
A quick look at the headlines once again. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian en route to New Delhi on a 5-day visit to India. Issues of defense cooperation, climate change and trade high on the agenda. Indian Information and Broadcasting Minister Prakash Javadekar says fresh project investments in India touched a whopping 10.72 lakh crore rupees amid COVID-19 pandemic. Bangladesh issues notification for week-long hard lockdown starting from Wednesday to contain spread of COVID-19 infection. United States expresses serious concerns over China's actions directed against Taiwan. And in Ipl Cricket, Punjab Kings set a target of 222 runs for Rajasthan Royals in Mumbai. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Iraq. And with that, we end this bulletin. See you at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.